my name is Biz Tanner. I have the honor of introducing you to tonight's speakers. Leading this evening's conversation is our library director, Sky Patrick. Sky was appointed LA County Library Director in 2016. In her role, she is responsible for the library's 86 libraries, 15 vehicle mobile fleet, and resources that are used by more than 3.4 million customers across LA County. In addition to helping LA County Library go fine-free and initiating several other services to help provide more access and opportunity for customers, Sky launched the library's I Count Equity Initiative, which ensures library services and programs address the needs of LA County's diverse communities. Under Sky's leadership, LA County Library received the 2023 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries. As the library director, Sky continues to reinforce the library's role in the community as a civic and cultural center, a hub for public information and services, and an institution of literacy, innovation, and learning. Tonight, Sky will be interviewing Mychal Threets, librarian, literacy, and mental health advocate, and viral social media influencer. Mychal grew up in Fairfield, California, and was homeschooled as a kid. He got his first library card at age 5, and his passion for the library and reading grew from there. As a lover of stories, he enjoys learning something new every day, and that includes learning why people love their local library. Mychal uses social media to share stories of library kids and library grown-ups, and has amassed a large following of nearly 2 million followers across social platforms, including TikTok and Instagram. He started his career as a library shelver and worked his way up to becoming supervising librarian at Fairfield Civic Center Library in Solano, California. He's now focusing on his advocacy work and other exciting endeavors, which he and Sky will discuss later in this program. Mychal has a bachelor's degree in communications and his master's in library and information science. In 2023, he received the American Library Association's I Love My Librarian Award. When Mychal is not at the library or talking about libraries, he's often with family, friends, or his troublesome cats, Machine Gun Kitty and Kissin' Cat Barlow. Welcome, Mychal. Sky, we're going to hand the program over to you.
Thanks, Biz, and welcome, Mychal. Before we get started on our interview, I think, Jessica, can you pull up the land acknowledgement? The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Taviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash people. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to healing and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and communities of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful that we have the opportunity to live, work on these ancestral lands, and we are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and the local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Tactaviam Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, the Gabrielingo Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Quiche Nation, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. Mychal, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this.
Well, we have a ton of questions to ask you, and we've been waiting to welcome you to Trailblazers for quite some time. I'm sure everybody on the call knows Mychal and knows how long he's been at his sort of social media rise to stardom. But I've been watching you for just under a year and watching you elevate the profession, elevate mental health issues, and just being an all-around library kid. I love this term that you've coined, and so maybe we can get into that a little bit. So I know that you've shared with your followers that the library was when you were younger, and obviously today it was your home away from home. And if you could talk about that a little bit and what the library meant for you when you were younger, how were you introduced to the library? I've seen pictures of your parents and you. So how did you end up being a library kid? What does that mean?
The library's always been a part of my life. I've been going to the library since I was probably 2 or 3 years old, far before before my conscious memory. I've been a constant library visitor. I think my mom homeschooled me in the local library, in Sonoma County Library, specifically Fairfield Civic Center Library. From the earliest possible age, I was homeschooled from pre-K, basically from schooling, all the way until senior year of high school. So I've always known the library. The library is where I spent every single month of the year. So I've loved the library for my entire life. To me, a library kid is just a kid who's always been to the library. Once a library kid, always a library kid. I love saying that's one of my favorite quotes I just tell myself. I don't know if I did coin the term library kid. I think for me, a library kid is just a person who's always been to the library. I call them library kids because to protect their privacy, and also I don't know their gender. And I think that's fair to them. I think I've always had library grown-ups who will say their gender, but I still always say I don't know what they think. So until I hear them say who they are, I call them library kids just because it's the easiest thing. And also, there's just so many library kids out there. They just can't remember all their various names. So it's somewhat of a cop out to me to call them library kid.
Well, what's funny is that you may not remember them, but I guarantee you this, they remember you, right? I think a lot of us who are in this field, we kind of happened upon it. And I too would have likely been coined a library kid in the olden days. As my daughter says, anything that was more than 3 years ago is qualified olden days. How did you get here? How did you get to be in the field of librarianship? What inspired you to move into this field? I know you said you started as a page or a page equivalent, you worked your way up, but what made you like take that step and go to school, graduate school, to attain a library science degree?
That's such a great question. It's one of my favorite questions I get all the time as Machine Gun Kitty is trying to join our conversation. She knows that I'm on the computer, so
She
she's
should
about to
just
step
come
in.
on in. Come
She's
on
getting
in.
ready to. She'll
Yeah.
be here any second. No, I you know what people always say, like, when did you know you want to become a librarian? Like, were you like always like that library kid, that library person? I was that library kid who wanted to be an astronaut. I loved Katherine Johnson. My mom homeschooled us so that we would learn about Nat Turner, Emmett Till, so many cultural icons and Black culture and Mexican culture from an early age. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I want to be a librarian from the age of 8 all the way on. I mean, I always loved the library, but I still wanted to be, again, astronaut. I wanted to be a firefighter. I was still a weird library kid. I wanted to be the first Black president of the United States of America. That didn't happen. I love joking that thank goodness Obama stole that dream. I had enough struggles as a librarian. But no, for me, I think honestly, I've struggled for so long with my mental health. I think when I was really struggling, I didn't know what to do. As an adult, I didn't know what direction I wanted to take my life in. I went back to Sonoma County Library. I was sitting at the Fairfield Cordelia Library, just sitting there, feeling comfortable, feeling safe. And to this day, I still have no idea what came over me. I was like, you know what, this is a cool place to be. I wonder what it would take to become a librarian. And I asked a person at the front desk. I just said, how do you become a librarian? How do you work for the library? And then she already knew I was going to ask a question, and she actually had the County of Solano Jobs website pulled up, and she showed me how to apply. I applied. I became a shelver a couple months later, and then just kept on going from there. I think I loved it so much. I was still struggling. I wasn't making library friends like I do nowadays. Nowadays, if I go to a library, I'm probably going to make a library friend. Back then, I was just still figuring things out. And then after about a little over almost 2 years of being a shelver, they said, hey, here's a library assistant job posting. And I applied, and I told myself, if I get this promotion, maybe library life is for me. And I had the privilege of talking with you today, so I must have gotten that promotion. And that's when I started kind of like pressing fast forward on my library career. That's why I went to University of Phoenix, got my bachelor's degree in communications. And then right after that, I went to San Jose State University and got my master's degree in library information science. I always tell people it's not a humble brag when I say that I got my master's degree in 4 semesters. I did it far too fast. I wanted to make sure certain people knew I got the degree. So it's not a humble brag. And I always tell people, don't do what I did. Make sure you at least take 2 years to do your degree, if possible, just so you can learn as much and just cherish every single moment. So to me, to answer your question, I honestly don't know why I pursued librarianship fully. I think it was just from being a library kid, loving libraries all my life, and then just being an adult, going through the worst times of my life, and struggling and just feeling safe, feeling comfortable in a local library, and saying
Mm,
maybe I can at least take this step forward. And I actually
yeah.
did it, and I got help along the way.
hmm So help orient our audience. How long have you been a professional librarian? 5 years, 10 years, 3 years?
I have been an actual librarian since 2018. I worked for libraries since November of 2013.
Okay, got it. So this field is riddled with like quirkiness. Like we do all kinds of things people are not even clear about. We are tasked with many, many things, many responsibilities, especially those of our team members who are on the front line, separate and apart from those of us in leadership. What would you say was one of the most surprising things that you just have discovered in this last half decade about librarianship or about your position? Like, what was the surprising thing?
I think the most surprising thing, just not even more so from librarianship, just because I had the privilege of working in library for so long before becoming a librarian that I knew a lot of the things that were going to happen. I think the amount of times one that you get asked where is the bathroom was remarkably surprising, and then two, just the things that happen in bathroom, not necessarily incidents, but just overall bathroom. I mean, library people, as you know, wear so many various hats, wearing mental health worker hats, social worker hats, but we also wear the unexpected plumber hats. Where I think just being a library
Don't
assistant, being
forget
a
the
library associate,
janitor.
yes, all of those. There's too many hats. I don't know how we keep them all on our
Yeah.
head. I think that's why I have so much hair, just to try to fit as many hats as possible. I think just those little tidbits. But I think the most unexpected things are just like how many friendships you form
Mm,
each day, especially as a public library worker. Because I'm sure it's the
mm-hmm.
same thing for school librarians. It's just those conversations that we have with
Yeah.
people every single day from all walks of life, from rich people, poor people, the unhoused, the mentally ill, families, grown-ups, kids, teens, everybody seems
Mm-hmm.
to like there's just that trust in the local library, just that true helper is who library people are. I think I just as much as I've always loved the library, I never realized how many various conversations library people have throughout their careers.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're kind of touching on something that we're kind of joking about all the hats that we're required to wear. But for those folks who are listening who are not librarians, I would hope that at least half of them aren't. How would you walk someone through your day? Like, I know that you're no longer with the Solano County Library, but like, what would you be responsible for in addition to the library kids?
That's such a great question. It's honestly such a difficult question. I think from every job that I had. I mean, I was a library shelver, I was a library aide, library assistant, library associate, children's librarian, marketing librarian, and a supervising librarian. All those jobs have different day-to-day tasks. I think for me, there was. I mean, I think that's the interesting part people don't realize about being a librarian or a library worker is that it's so unpredictable. But I think for the most part, it would be like I think for people to know, it's checking in items, the items that you drop through the book drop that you return through the automated materials handling machine in the morning. Each morning, someone checks those items in. This conversation, this morning huddles, is figuring out what we're going to go about for the day. It's checking the desk schedule to see when I'm going to be on the desk. Is it going to be 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock? Is it going to be 11 o'clock and then 46? And then from there, it's a lot of checking emails. Every single position except for Shelver was always checking emails, like who's emailing me today, what are we up to, what are we going to come across. But then it just again all those conversations that happen, being on desk, helping people at the computer, helping people print their documents, helping people sign up for email addresses, apply for jobs, print out their plane tickets, a whole host of things, helping people with random research projects, checking people into study rooms, unlocking the meeting rooms as a children's librarian, preparing for story time, getting the books together, making sure my phone and the Bluetooth are charged because I never did acapella story
That's what I
time.
was actually going to say. Like, there's this whole new sort of facet of librarianship. Obviously, going out and school visits and class visits, that's sort of old hat. But there's now this whole online persona, social media persona that many of you on the front line, we have plenty of our team members who do the same, marketing and frontline branch folks. There's this whole added component to the job of trying to like create an online presence and intrigue and figuring out how to communicate with the people who are watching and build capacity and momentum. I'm going to ask you a little bit about, actually I'm going to veer off my questions here. My team knows I always do this. When did you start creating your sort of online persona? I saw you about a year ago, I think it was. But you had already had a ton of followers by then. So when did you start that part?
I started it actually a long time ago. I started when I first became a children's librarian in 2018. I started sharing to my Facebook wall. That's when I figured out how I love to call little library kids unhinged because they truly are in the best of ways. They're very silly. They're very wholesome people. I always tell people that as a children's librarian, I used to do close to 8 story times per week in the library and in various sites in various schools, and they were always willing to tell me their stories, tell me about their day. Many secrets with library kids who would tell me that their mom was getting ready to have a little brother, a little sister. Their mom was like, that was a secret. You weren't supposed to tell the local librarian that. But that's just part of what they would tell me. They would just tell me any if I was listening, they would tell me their funniest stories, going to kindergarten graduation parties and having kids ask me not to steal their pies. I'm sitting next to them. Just such silly things. I was just like, you know what? These stories, they make my day every time I'm here. I just have to start sharing them with other people. So 2018 is when I found out, as a children's librarian, I found out how unhinged, how silly they are, and I just started posting them to my Facebook wall. And then you fast forward to 2022, 2023, when the pandemic hits. That's when I downloaded TikTok. That's when I realized that I could take social media into a whole new realm. That's when being an overwhelmed supervisor in March of 2023 is when I really started sharing videos to Instagram and TikTok. Just because it's much faster for me to create a video than it is to create a Facebook post. Just all those different thoughts, being a perfectionist. First story that I really shared was of the library kid who asked me if I was a boy librarian or girl librarian. It took off. I was like, oh, that's cool for libraries. Some more library cards, some more library visits. That's cool. Cool little 15 minutes of fame type of story. And it's kept on going ever since. So I've been actively on library, bookish, social media since 2018.
Yeah, it sounds like I've found you, intersected with your page, like right as you started to blow up in this past year. I think a lot of us follow you. How do you manage your sudden fame? So, let me contextualize this question. For librarians, we tend to be more on the introverted side, not exclusively, not myself, and clearly not you. But generally speaking, we're more subdued. We tend to be more introverted. How have you managed the onslaught of attention? And, you literally became probably one of the most well-known librarians ever. And that's a tall order.
It is quite a lot. You know what I think. I think it shocks people to discover that I'm very much an introvert. I think by the definition I'm an extrovert. Like I take my my social battery refuels by being around people, but it can just take 5 minutes. That's it. Just a quick burst of being around people. But I am very much an introvert. I love my alone time. I love bothering my cats as much as they bother me. I'm not big on crowds. I like quiet time. So I think for me, it also was very difficult to get where I'm at. But I just like, you know what? No other library people, because we're all so introverted, no one's going to use social media as a tool for what it can be to get people back in the library, back to using the books and knowing that we have video games, board games, musical instruments, movies, TV series, tooling libraries, all these cool things. So that's why I did it. That's why one of my cats is echoing my thoughts right now. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know exactly how I handle the fame. I really am not the biggest fan of it. I don't like it. I think for me, like the way I handle it is with my mental health tech team, is who I call them as my friends, my family members, my very close friends who I found at the library.
You call them your mental health tech team? Is that was that what you said?
No, mental health check team, the
Check team. Got you. Okay.
mental health check-in team. That's what I call them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we do check in each day just to see how we're doing, how we're going
Mm-hmm.
about the day. A few of us have a Discord server, which is remarkably helpful, where there's things like want to talk about it, don't want to talk about it, moments of joy where we just share moments of joy from each day. Like today, I was at the local library and there were some baby ducks in the ponds. Going to send them a video of the baby ducks very soon. Want to talk about it? Just saying, oh, here's what happened in my day. Like say we're at the library, this is what happened. It was really
Mm-hmm.
hard, and we talk about it together. Or don't want to talk about it. Same thing, but saying don't want to talk about it. So we just follow each other with
Mm-hmm.
gifs, with memes, with YouTube
Mm-hmm.
videos, with
Mm-hmm.
TikToks. That's how I get used to it. It's just going about each day, trying to figure things out. As much as I'm not necessarily the fan of being one of the most well-known librarians in the world. At the same time, I'm so blessed by it. It's so cool to be able to talk about these cool things, to share people's stories, and to
Yeah.
remind people that the library exists, that we're better than ever, and that we're going to be around for a very, very long time. And we're going to keep on improving day by day, week by week. We're going to reach people where they're at, which is the beauty of social media.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about social media and what happened. Again, is that the instant fame is, I imagine, a shock to anyone, but those of us who consider ourselves the normal people, meaning that we're not in the industry, we're here in LA County, and everything's about the industry. In fact, it seems like half of the people, if not more than that, are industry associated. When you're not that person, and you see yourself like exponentially increasing your sort of reach, let's talk about the bullying part of this phenomena called internet fame. How have you been dealing with that? Can you just kind of socialize that?
Yeah, you know what? I think the bullying aspect of social media is the worst part. I think not just for me, but for anybody. I mean, I think in being where I'm at on social media, I've befriended so many very cool people who have talked to me about the bullying aspect, and it almost seems like once you get to a certain amount of followers, that's when just bullying trolls come out to get you no matter what, just because that's their hobby, which is a weird thing. It's weird to have trolling, to have bullying be your hobby, but it definitely is. There's people who are just out to get you, and it's something that I've had to come to terms with, but it's also I think made me a better person. It's made me a better social media person. And it still is a bit of a struggle. I think for me, I get so much positivity on social media, on Book Talk, on Bookstagram, on just bookish library social media. So many people send me messages saying, "Look, I got my library card from all over the United States, all over the world." We're like, "Look, I got my library kid. Here's my library kid in the library with their library card." So many messages of mental health hope. I love checking the messages, and I used to love checking the comments, but just gotten to be so much that I think that's my biggest social media takeaway, is to not check the comments. That's something I learned pretty quickly in the last year, which is sad because again, there's so many positive comments. There's so many people who are like, keep on doing what you're doing. Thanks for what you're doing. But just for my own mental health sanity, just for overall peace, is to not check the comments. A lot of people don't realize is a lot of for all the bullying things that have happened with me is I've never seen any of them first. They've always been made known to me. The two or three times that I've ever spoken about the bullying specifically is because it's come to the attention of another library kid. So if I ever talk about bullying, that's the only time I ever have, and I ever will. It's because a library kid or the library grown up lets me know that they've seen it. So I address it just to remind people that bullying is not okay at any stage. It's not okay when you're a kid. It's not okay when you're a teenager. It's not okay when you're adults. And I also love to acknowledge that bullying, sometimes the boys themselves are going through a lot of things, which is not okay. It's not okay to go through things and then bully others as your coping mechanism. But I also recognize that that's why people bully one another, is because they're also struggling and they don't know any
Y-
better. So to me, that's how we
Yeah.
kind of promote kindness.
Well, and I think that you kind of present this really great opportunity in using yourself as a use case. One, to recognize that, bullying is a byproduct of someone else's suffering. So I think that that's an important lesson that you can certainly share with your library kids or folks in general, but for young people. And then also take it as an opportunity to build their own self-confidence. I have a small child, a young girl, and this is something very present for us, always trying to get her to hopefully see beyond the bully and hopefully minimize the impact of their words and their actions. So I love the idea of you just sort of reinforcing that for library kids. Let me ask you a couple of other questions. We're living in a very, let's call it auspicious. We're living in a very auspicious time. And what are your thoughts, or where do you position yourself in the conversation around book banning and censorship in the profession?
My position on book bans is really for library people like myself and for anybody to just focus on celebrating the freedom to read, which I know is very, very difficult. I know people want to talk about the actual book banning because that's our solution to get it to stop. But to me, the only way that we can convince people who are calling for all these books to be banned, which I think a lot of people don't realize, is there's only really a very, very small amount of people who are calling for these book bans. Actually, I think there was at one point for the major book bans, there was something like 10 to 15 people who were responsible for the majority of the calls for books to be banned across the United States. But to me, I think talking about celebrating the freedom to read, the fact that we all have the right to read, is how we can convince these people that we all deserve to be represented in books, on bookshelves, in the pages, in libraries. We all deserve to feel seen in books. So I think that's my stance. It's just like we all deserve access to books. I'm not taking away from library grown-ups having the conversation with their kids about what they're comfortable with, what's appropriate for them. I'm a firm believer that that should happen. That those two entities, parents, caregivers, and their kids, should get to have a conversation about what's appropriate, what they're ready for. But it shouldn't be impacting all these other people. And that's the problem with book bans, is that they take it from a household conversation to a nationwide, worldwide conversation, and that just isn't fair to other people. There's all sorts of people who might be ready for different books. I don't know if you're familiar with A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer. It's a very
It's on my bookshelf at home over there. Yes.
it's a very
Yeah.
it's a very triggering book.
Indeed true.
And my mom read that book aloud to me and my siblings when I was 11 or 12, and my siblings were younger. And that's a lot of it's a very troublesome book to discuss with kids, but that's where we're at. So, but if you call, like, maybe I wouldn't say that I would not recommend that book to kids necessarily, but that's something that my mom was like, yeah, you guys seem ready for it. But in today's world, that's something where she wouldn't have been able to do that. And I think that's a problem, because we should all be able to broaden our horizons with books. And so often, and when you talk about banned books, they don't want you to read books about people featuring people of color, the LGBTQIA plus community. And that's just not fair. So often they don't even read the books. They're just so afraid of this agenda about what kids are going to think, what grown-ups are going to think, how are they going to have all these conversations. And just like, well, let them have a conversation. Let's figure where we're at. Like, maybe the conversation won't even happen. If the conversation happens,
Right.
maybe you'll go from there, but let it brew. Let us figure out where we're going to be. I remember when I was a children's librarian, and I would read these picture books, and I would be so nervous if I read a certain book to talk about, like, even something that's very, very low on the totem pole or high on the totem pole. What are the kids going to ask? When are they going to ask about this? And almost every single time, they would never ask a question at all. They just wanted to know what was going to happen on the next page. Is same thing about kids' movies, is that we watch these movies when you're a kid versus when you're an adult, and you just you don't even realize what's happening in the dialogue when you're watching these kid movies as a kid. As an adult, you're like, that's hilarious. Has that always been there in this movie? And it's because the way the kids see the world, adults see the world, very, very different. But
Yeah,
both
there's a
so
study
very
done,
insightful.
Mychal, a little while ago, and I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the academic, but on this very topic, where she followed young kids, and it was discovered through the study that in fact they weren't influenced by books and stories and these sort of protector things that censors feel that they're protecting the youth from. They're not even influenced by that. In fact, they're more influenced by their own group of friends and their sort of insular community. So that was an interesting thing for me to discover. Another thing I think that you brought up, I think it's really important in our field, is that this is a conversation between a parent and a child, or a caregiver and a child. for that family, but it may be very, very reasonable and okay for another family. So I definitely appreciate that. It's a perfect kind of segue into this other question that we have about being a librarian of color. That would be you and maybe me. Let's talk about your perspective on diversity within the profession. You and I both know we're about 85% white female as a profession in total. You and I sit outside those margins in a variety of ways. What's been your experience? What are your thoughts on diversity in librarianship in the 21st century?
My experience and my thoughts are that there needs to be far much more diversity in librarianship in the library world. It does happen. I mean, like we talked about earlier about did I always want to become a librarian? And the reason I didn't always want to become a librarian is because I didn't see library people who looked like myself. There weren't people of color behind the desk. There weren't men behind the desk, and I'm not trying to take away anything from the white women who have been librarians for years. They're very great at what they do. They're the ones who have made it possible for me to get where I'm at. But having librarians of color is how we represent the community. Is how we show them that anything is possible. That they do belong. Having someone who looks like them behind the desk, it's just so much more different. It's so much more welcoming, inclusive, equitable. All those wonderful things that libraries need to be. I think for me, I'm trying to convince other library systems, library programs that these degrees that we have to have become librarians are not so much necessary. Like, I love my degree. I love that I have a master's degree in library and information science from San Jose State University. I enjoyed my program, but so much of like what I've gained over the years has been from on the job experience, from learning those things. I'm not saying that the degree is useless,
No,
but it just
understood.
but there needs to be other things that make it possible for people who look like you and myself to be encouraged to become library workers. I think if you don't need a master's degree to become a librarian, we'll see more people becoming librarians. We'll see more Black men, Mexican men, Asian men, Black women, Asian women, Mexican women who want to get into the field actually can, because those degrees, those requirements make it so daunting for anyone to step into the field, not just because of,
Sure.
I mean, it could be financial, but it also could just be time overall. They're like, how am I going to devote my life to the next 2 years to become a library worker? Like, what if there are no jobs? What if something happens
And
in between
it's
that time?
also cost prohibitive. Not everyone can afford a master's
Mhm.
degree, particularly, people of color or people from diverse backgrounds. And so, I think I often sort of joke with my team. First of all, let me step back and let me say this. Many directors or people in leadership in libraries, we have this conversation all the time. Should we require a master's degree, or maybe we, require for some positions and not others, so that we can be more equitable and open the field to, potential librarians, librarians of color, men. This is one of the only fields that I can say with certainty that we have to really promote to men in order for that gender equity, that gender balance. And so we all struggle with that. And I think we're all aware of both the challenge and the opportunity. But like you're saying, it's just a matter of like sort of reframing what we understand and continuing to hopefully get better at welcoming everyone into the field, because it's pretty cool. It's a field that you can do almost everything you're interested in under the guise of librarianship. That's how I always point it. Let's talk a little bit about, where are you? Like, you can talk literally or figuratively. So you left the field, and we can talk a little bit about, you managing your own mental health. I'd love for you to kind of speak on that. But where are you? I could say this. We've had a lot of conferences, to everyone on the call, and Mychal has been everywhere. I have seen him up and down the coast, back and forth across, to the East Coast. So you have been everywhere, but where are you now? What are you doing?
I am literally in Fairfield, California. I still live in where I used to work, Solano County, right by the library where I used to work. I think a lot of people had that question, like, oh, you're now jumping a little bit ahead, you're now the PBS resident librarian. Yeah, do you have to go down to where their headquarters are? I'm like, nope, I'm still live in my same apartment. I still live in Fairfield, California, in the Bay Area. I am PBS and PBS Kids resident librarian. That is essentially a remote partnership. It is a partnership with PBS and PBS Kids. It's a very cool social media series. I'm a PBS kid. I have Arthur Reed's library card tattooed on me. I grew up on Reading Rainbow and Mr. Rogers. So it's so cool to see my name on PBS's things, to see their logo floating next to my head. I also work with the Children's Literacy Initiative as their literacy ambassador. They believe that, that literacy is the key to liberation. I love that. I love that they believe that we are all freer people. We are all our authentic selves through literacy. That's how we become free human beings. So those are the main things I'm working on. I have been everywhere, all these various conferences, all these various things that I'm doing, which are so remarkable. But I am getting ready to hopefully very soon to take more time off for my mental health. That's why the reason I left the library. I think you asked about ways I'm managing my mental health. I'm still figuring that out for myself. I don't have any of the answers. I'm still figuring it out. I'm taking time, taking days. That's the main reason. If you ever do see me on a conference, I'm probably on a 24 to 48 hour whirlwind trip. I usually take a red eye to wherever I'm going, and then I leave the afternoon or night of
Oh,
whatever
that's
afternoon.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to get back. I don't like to fly. I'm
Yeah,
not afraid
it's
of, I'm not
tough.
afraid I'm not afraid of flying. I just don't. I'm not fond of it. It's just my anxiety skyrockets as soon as I get to the airport, and then also I
Yeah,
just have I have bad ears. I've ruptured my eardrums several times in 34 years of life.
yeah, yeah.
So air
Got it.
pressure on airplanes is not
Yeah,
the best thing. So,
yeah. Not a
but
lot of fun.
yeah, but so many cool things. Figuring out next steps. Figuring out where I'm gonna be.
Mhm.
I love being a librarian. It's why I went and got those degrees that we were talking about. So I'm still hopeful to continue being a librarian in various aspects too.
I love that. And I love that you're the new PBS Kids librarian. I think I saw something with you and Arthur. It's just such a story. I know what I was going to say. We were trying to get LeVar Burton to be here with you. So we're like, we have to get LeVar and Mychal in one virtual room. It did not work out this time, but we're going to try again in the fall and see if we can get the two of you in one room talking about literacy and kids and learning. Just like what an exceptional group that would be. So here's a couple questions I want to make sure I reserve time to answer questions from our audience. Let's start with you. Where is the book? When are you writing a book? How far are you in writing a book?
I can't give too many details, but I have written a picture book, and we are working to get it published. I would love to continue writing more picture book, writing more books for kids. I love stories. I love listening to people's stories. So I would also really love a chance to talk with a library people to tell their stories. And also,
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, as much as I love talking about mental health and encouraging people that they're not alone, I would love to talk to well-known and less well-known people
Mm.
about why they're still here in the world, to people to remind people that they're not alone, and just share people's stories of either just mental health survival, surviving their own intrusive thoughts, or just what they would tell people who think they're alone, how they would
Oh, I like
encourage
that.
them encourage them to keep on moving forward.
Yeah, I love it. All of these talks with, what are you reading?
Oh, that's a good question. I am reading a couple of different things. I have a book club, a virtual book club on an app called Fable. They're a book club app.
Mhm.
So we just finished reading a wonderful book called Hope Ablaze, which is a very deep book about a young Muslim woman who ended up having her hijab removed from a police officer. This is a fictional YA book,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's written. It's a poetry in verse novel. So
Mm.
beautiful fictional book with some poetry written throughout. It just makes you think. You learn about a lot about the Muslim culture, Muslim language, various things. I recommend that book. I just started this morning. I think where this thing is called "Where Sleeping Girls Lie."
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a synopsis anything about it, but that's our latest book club pick.
Okay.
And then I am re-listening to Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros on audiobook. So uh,
Got it. I love it.
it's like
I love it.
I need to catch up with the rest of the trilogy.
I love it. People are asking in the chat if you could list those books. Can you say those three books one more time, Mychal, for us?
Yes, Hope Ablaze by Sarah Mychal. Mychal
Mm-hmm.
is Mughal. And then Where Sleeping Girls Lie is by, I'm going to mispronounce her name, and I apologize. It's Farda Abike Iyamide.
One of the most important things that someone shared with me when I was a young children's librarian in the Bay with red dreads and a motorcycle, but that's another story for another time, is that you should never, ever judge people by a mispronunciation of a word because they are pronouncing it by reading. And once I
Hmm.
said, when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like, right, they're still reading it. They're just that how they see that it should be pronounced. And then, of course, with the correction, you'll say it the other way the next time. But it
Yes.
was nice for me to kind of like take the embarrassment out of. I always mispronounce everything. It's just how I am. But this woman said to me, I was on the reference desk. She's like, you should never feel embarrassed that you
Huh.
mispronounced something because you learned it by reading it.
I love that.
Yes. So
That's
let's get
amazing.
to some of these questions. So yes, thank you. We put the books into the chat that Mychal has recommended from his Fable app, virtual reading app. Okay, so we have Susan just saying, hi, Mychal, that she is also a homeschool library mom and she just loves
Hmm.
you.
That's amazing.
Uh,
I love homeschool families. I think people often ask me like, how do we reach homeschool families? How do we reach the homeschool communities? I'm like, just ask them. We're regular
yeah.
people just like anybody else. I'm like, I don't have all the answers for homeschool families. We liked a whole host of things. They like to talk about why they homeschool, about their kids' interests, just like anybody else.
Yeah, and when I was in the Bay, the Bernal Library at the time, we used to have a ton of homeschool families who would come in and utilize the library. It was really quiet during the day, as I'm sure. I don't think that's inconsistent with today, but lots of families come in and utilize the library during typical school hours for homeschooling. So I love that. We have a question here from the audience. What questions do you like to ask your patrons when helping them find a great book? So, otherwise known as Reader's Advisory.
Oh, that is a good question. I think for kids, it's the easiest thing in the world. Honestly, I've discovered that most often they wear what they love on their person. If it's Paw Patrol on their hat, if it's Spider-Man on their shoes, if it's Miss Rachel on their backpack, whatever they tend to love is either on their shirt or they're holding it in their hand. And that's just a question I ask them. I just ask them about that. But I think for kids, teens, and adults, I just like asking people what they've read before, and then I ask people just what they like. I just like asking people about their passions, about their interests. We just have general conversations about their kids, about their friends, about their favorite
Mm-hmm.
sports team, various hobbies. And then I tend to kind of just type it into Google. I'm a bad librarian where I always say Google is my best friend as a library worker. I did all the database questions, and I'm like, I don't use those databases. I use Google. I type things into Google. I think that's also an unexpected thing I learned about librarianship is we are remarkable Googlers. We can help people learn to do the right search queries. So honestly, just general conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think other than
And
for kids
awareness,
asking.
it sounds like. Like
Yes,
you're looking and watching and listening.
yes, exactly. Other than for kids, like asking them like, do you like Batman? Do you like Spider-Man? I don't think I have any of the same questions I ask every person during readers advisory
Mm-hmm.
interactions. I let the person steer the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and then we find books, we find audiobook, we find ebooks, we find manga, we find comic books together.
Mm.
And half the time I think just the fact that I'm like as much as I love books. I'm definitely a well-read person, but I'm probably the least well-read of library people. So I think I've taken a
Mm-hmm.
good deal of recommendations over the last 10 years from library
Mm-hmm.
research. So I think that also helps a lot is me letting them know I might read this book. I might read this book right alongside you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still unable to read manga just because my brain doesn't like to go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried
Oh,
over and
meaning how
over
the
again.
pages are the
Yes,
opposite way.
of
Yeah,
how it's set up.
yeah. That's a good analogy, reading backwards. It is for us Americans, not for Japanese. Here's
Sure.
another question for you. How do you think, and I think this is an important question because we work in public libraries and we do typically encounter people who have mental health issues or mental health breaks frequently. So it says, how do you think libraries impact mental health outcomes of communities for both library kids and adults?
Oh, that's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
Um, it honestly depends on the library itself, would be my answer. I think there is
Mm-hmm.
a unique way to approach mental health for library kids and for library adults. Fortunately and unfortunately, it depends on the library staff. Again, we talked about those hats. It's not fair for library workers to have to help out the community the way that you do. It is fair, but it's unfair because we're not trained to do such things. And I say that it depends on the library community and library staff because it
Mm-hmm.
depends on how they respond to people. Oftentimes we have a bad day. As much as library users take out their anger on library staff, sometimes, unfortunately, library staff can inadvertently do the same to library users, and neither way is fair. But I think we can positively impact mental health for both kids and adults if we just treat people with kindness, with empathy, which
Mm-hmm.
99.999% of the time, that's what library workers do. So we have
Yeah.
to just keep on going above and beyond. I think it's just having conversations with people, reminding them, the
Right.
mentally ill, the unhoused, that they're people, just like the rest of people. They're human
Mm-hmm.
beings. They deserve to be told hello, hey, how you doing? Are you safe? I think that's been the best thing to me in interacting with people who are mentally ill, asking them, are you safe? For whatever reason, just that question, no matter what, if you think they're mentally ill or not, just saying, are you safe? It means the world to them, but you're not like, hey, what are you doing? Like, even before you address potentially their problem behaviors, are you safe? Like, just setting the stage,
Mm-hmm.
setting the stone,
Oh, I
you're
like
safe,
that. Are you safe?
you're,
Okay.
just safety, your comfortability is my ultimate goal before getting into anything else, asking them their name, telling them my name. It just goes so long. And that's true for kids and for adults. It's just making them feel safe, making them feel like they
Yeah.
belong. And that's how you form friendships. And also just knowing it's going to take more than one day, letting them know like, oh, hey, I remember I talked to you
It's like
on Monday at the
building of a
library.
relationship.
Now it's,
Yeah.
yeah, now it's been 2 weeks. Now it's been 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We're still here at the library. I'm still here at the library. What's going on in your life? Where are you at in your journey? Here's where I'm at in my journey. So the kind of like the long con of libraries and
Yeah.
mental health is to get us all on the same page, and that way we can get people going towards the best resources. I think that's what libraries do. They point those who are suffering towards Kaiser, towards the hospital, towards these self-help books, towards the calm app, whatever it may be, and just letting people know that we don't have all the answers. We don't know what the right answer is for each person, but for each individual, we're going to work towards getting them that answer so they can get help, so they can keep on going one more day, so they can take it one day at a time to get to the next day. And I think that's the beauty of library people, is that's what we do for all of our library users, kids, teens, and adults, is remind them that all we care about is getting them to the next step.
Well, I think one thing is worthy of acknowledgement is that frontline library workers do experience compassion fatigue. We talk about this a lot at our library, and we acknowledge the intense emotional drain that it can be on frontline workers. And so I think what I hear you saying is that having a bit of grace, both for the library worker and the library customer user, we call our customers neighbors. And just like trying to reorient yourself and take that sort of step back, take that moment for yourself before you say something you don't mean and you find yourself being very unhelpful, which is human. Like, you mean, we need to acknowledge the fact that these are human responses. And as much as I think we like to think about it, librarians are not superhuman. We're just regular people and we have bad days, but that grace, I think, is really necessary. I have another question here from an old and dear friend of mine, Jason. Hi, Jason. He says, I attended Black Male Librarian Zoom webinar a while back, and you were one of the hosts. It was amazing. Any plans of hosting another? And how do you stay connected with other Black librarians or Black male librarians?
I would love to host another panel like that. I don't think it's not necessarily up to me. I didn't create that panel. I was invited to be a part of it. But in going on to your next part of your question is I stay in touch with a lot of Black librarians and librarians in general, Mexican librarians, Asian librarians, just all general library friends, mainly through social media. Just exchanging various DM, just forming those friendships, those bonds over Facebook threads, Twitter, all those chronically online things where we're all at.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that I do it. So I would love to have many more conversations, many more panels like that, just to talk about
Yeah.
deep library conversations, but also just general library conversation. I think I think I always love talking with library kids because I love the way that they ask questions. They ask questions that adults don't get asked. They ask,
Mm-hmm.
what's your favorite dinosaur? They ask, how fast can you run in your new shoes? All those sorts of silly questions that adults are like, I want to talk about my favorite cereal. I want to talk about my favorite various characters, my favorite Star Wars character, things like that.
So that's a great question. And I have a multi-pronged question. I'm going to try and take it a little bit at a time because these are
Sure.
great questions. So the first part of this one is, what would you like to see happen for libraries in the future? That's a good one.
Yeah, that is so in depth. I mean, I think one of my next main campaigns is for there to be a school librarian in every single school. That's so
Yes.
important. That's something very important to me. I'm a librarian. My mom is a teacher. My cousins are teachers. So I know how valuable schools are. And when I was a children's
Every
librarian,
library is working on that initiative. You should make sure that you connect with them.
yes, exactly. So I think that's most important for me is for every school library to have a librarian. And just I think I would love for libraries just to have more representation in staff and for books for us to be able to keep on telling these stories, to keep on reading about these stories. So I think those are my kind of baseline for each library to
Yes,
have.
I love it. Here's another one. How do you, well, I'm paraphrasing, how do you see incentivizing reading or having more programs? How do you see librarians incentivizing those programs?
Just for there to be more programs.
Yeah, I interpret that to mean like having more people come to your programs, or teaching library
Oh,
kids the love of reading. Like what are some of your strategies or proven strategies?
for programs, I think I discovered that the core, like to get people to come to programs would be for there to be, I think food, animals, art, and culture are kind of like the tried and true. Like most likely, if you have a program that centers on those things, people are going to be interested. Like I've always told, like when I was a supervisor, I told my team, like you could try new things. I'm all for it. I think it's great. Let's find out what the community likes. But like if you don't hear directly from the community if they want a certain program, something to happen, I've discovered that those four things: art, culture, food, and animals are tried and true.
You're
I
right.
think I think for getting people to love reading, to fall in love with reading. Like my mission to raise literacy rates is just the book joy, the library joy that I'm always talking about. I think if we can get people loving reading, recognizing that it's not a chore, it's not a task, we'll find more literate people. Like letting kids
Yes.
read manga, not me. Really letting
Re
kids read manga. I'm trying. Letting
yes.
kids read comic books, read those picture
Yes.
books, read Spider-Man. Let them love reading. They're going to devour more and more books, more and more literature, so that the books they keep on building higher and higher and higher. They keep on challenging themselves to read more books because they love it. And that's
We
what
are in 100% agreement with that
yeah,
one.
like for adults, let them read urban fiction, read romance, read your Stephen King, read your James Patterson,
That's right.
read Colleen Hoover. There's
Oh
nothing
yeah,
wrong.
speaking of
They're not.
James Patterson, didn't I see you with James Patterson recently? Did you
I
just
did
do
have
something with him?
I
Okay.
did have a conversation with James Patterson. Yes,
Okay.
the author of all of those books that library people
Well,
have to
one of the
shelve
best known
on the
authors
daily.
ever, if not
Yes.
ever. I
Yeah.
think there was a competition between him and J.K. Rowling, which I think he succeeded her. So I was going to ask you to shout out how people can contact you, but Jessica has put your TikTok and IG in the chat if you want to reach out to Mychal himself. Mychal, you've been such a pleasure. I have really looked forward to this conversation. I definitely would like to have you back when we have LeVar Burton here, which is, we're working on it, and just really kind of orient this conversation. I'd like us to talk about, incentives and things we can do to help boys read, specifically young boys of color generally, or boys generally, but young boys of color specifically. We started a program about 5 or 6 years ago called Barbershop Books. We were one of the first libraries to do it. There are tons of libraries doing it now, which is great. But like those sort of creative ideas around trying to incentivize young boys to read, or young people, but young boys, male gendered, male bodied young folks, I think is a bigger challenge for us in public librarianship. Either way, thank you so much. You've
Thank
been
you.
such a gift, and we hope to be able to invite you back. And I'd love you to take good care of yourself, and we will see you on the path, Mychal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this conversation. It's such an honor to speak with you. And I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for all of our listeners and so many beyond. So I really appreciate this.
Yes. Okay. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Trailblazers.